computer. Okay, all right, okay. So we started this now. Okay, so hello everyone. I am Sofia Likouris. I'm from the University of Edinburgh. I'm also a member of UCU. I am in the committee of the UCU branch of the University of Edinburgh, the Equalities Officer. I'm also a rep for EIS, and I'm also a member of the Staff Student Solidarity Network in Edinburgh, which is an organization that is has started unofficially since 2018, the previous UCU strike, and has become more of an organized group since the recent strikes. So I don't want to talk too much. This is the third meeting of the Edinburgh Trade Union Council's COVID Committee group, which focuses on problems and struggles that relate to the higher education institutions in Edinburgh, and we have 5 of these. So we have invited various colleagues from all these institutions. Maybe 1 or 2 are not here yet, and we will try to discuss a little bit what is the situation at the moment, where things are going, and see how we can start creating alliances, first of all within our own institutions across different unions that we have, and with the student bodies, and also with other groups, grassroots groups, other unions in the city of Edinburgh. So I would like to perhaps start with our colleague George Bruce from Heriot-Watt University, because this event tonight is mainly an event of solidarity to the problems that Heriot-Watt University have right now with their redundancies, alongside a discussion about how we can deal with these problems in a sort of long-term perspective. Okay, so let's see what George would like to share with us tonight.
Hi, am I?
Yes, you are, yep.
I'm on. Well, you probably, I think I might have mentioned it before, I attend the university's COVID response team meeting on a Monday, as an observer. So I see what they possibly might discuss things offline, because primarily if I'm there, I get the feeling that sometimes they have side meetings, but generally we see what they're up to and what they're proposing. A concern for us at the moment is what they're going to do, primarily going into semester 2, from the staff side. We'd like to know what their firm proposals are for that. The other big issue that's coming up at the COVID meeting at the moment is they see a real, and it's probably common across all universities, is they see a real risk in coming to Christmas, all the students breaking their contracts. Well, they've got this thing where they can do that now, and disappear, and then again that's a big hit for them in the revenue. And then in January, it was mentioned at the last one, how they put them into households of 10. So if they are allowed to go away, then there's the nightmare scenario of them all returning at different times, within the same household. So that needs to be looked at and be managed, because if you have like 3 come back in a household, and then they get put into quarantine, and then another, say, 2 come back 2 days later, then they're out of sync, with that household. So that was an issue that was raised there with them. Over the Christmas period, they're expecting certain amount of students to remain on campus, so they're looking at asking members of staff to work through the Christmas New Year period. I take it it's not right through the whole thing, because as far as I'm aware, there was a date which had Christmas Eve, holding a meal for students that were resident there on campus, and something round about New Year. because there definitely will be people that are left there. Other things that have picked up at the last meeting was that our security or safeguarding services, what they call themselves, they were flagging up that they were getting a bit more resistance from the students, which isn't surprising, you know, because they're young adults and they were told to come onto campus, you know, that everything was going to be fine. But after so many weeks of being sitting in accommodation and being told by the government that you can't go out, or you're not, we wouldn't like you to go out, and it's not surprising that they're getting our safeguarding is getting a bit of a kickback from the students now. There were one or two incidents that they were getting, you know, but where it was a new thing. But I think this is beginning to become a more, how could you put it, embedded issue, because there's a resistance building there. The only serious incidences that they flagged up, they said, I think, that it was the same names that were coming again and again. So it's not a thing that that's common, but I mean, you can only expect it from, you know, the student population. In January, they're expecting a big influx of new students arriving, of course, and that's going to be another issue for them. I think they think that the most difficult time is going to be the January intake, rather than, you know, managing the people that are left on campus over Christmas. From our side, we've raised with them, we don't really think that we ask for risk assessments, but they don't really do them in consultation with us. Hopefully that will change, because we're working on with the human resources and, you know, the new provost, and we're trying to work out a new relationship between the unions and the university going forward, so that we do consult, you know. And they started this with which we thought was very good, was a policy subcommittee, and that's working. We would like to see more along this line, you know, like in the way of risk assessments and things like that, where we are, you know, and as should be, are properly consulted beforehand, rather than just turning up at a quarterly employer meeting and being presented with a pile of documents and they sign off on this, you know. So I could finish there.
Okay, thank you, George. I'm just wondering if anybody has any quick question for George. I think it's better if we ask questions straight after people's,
yeah,
sure. But I mean, if there isn't anything, then maybe other questions might.
I could give you the figures, because I've got where was it? Number 6. The last Monday, that was Monday the 26th was our last COVID meeting, and at that time they had, that's more than a week ago, they didn't have one yesterday morning. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday this week. But last Monday, students tested positive living on campus, none. Positive living off campus, they had 1. Staff testing positive, they had 1. They had no students isolating on campus. Wow. They had 1 student isolating off campus and 1 member of staff isolating. So it's quite low. Okay.
Impressive. That's not the case with us at all in Edinburgh, in the University of Edinburgh. So maybe if there are no questions, Sophia has a question. Can you say something about the forthcoming strikes, George?
Yeah, I thought that would have come up next week, but then again, we'll be the 10th, I think, is the day of the meeting, and that's our first day of action. So we've got we met with the employers today, and another failure to agree meeting, you know, trying to get them to take compulsory redundancy off the table. Now, we're making reasonable progress with them in most areas, but there are a couple of outlying areas where we think they're hanging back, and, you know, so I think what they want us to do is they want us to delay, you know, a strike action, because they're making positive sounds to us. You know, I don't want to say too much, you know, they're making positive noises. and the proposal was that we delay, the industrial action. But at the moment, we've not committed to anything like that, because our position is that we want the compulsories off the table altogether. Apart from that, there was we spoke to the HEC of UCU and Paul Bridge, and they agreed, and they've written a letter to Harriet Watt saying that they are willing to consider censure. If things go badly, they're willing to consider a censure of Harriet Watt. But that's just to flag it up to them, that it's something that we are considering. They did ask us about this today, and I said that, oh, why are you doing this? It's not in the spirit of collaboration, and I said, well, it's one of the tools that's in our toolbox, and the letter was just to let you know that it's being considered. So.
Okay, thank you, George. I think maybe we should continue with the University of Edinburgh, and we have Sophia Woodman to tell us a few things, member of staff, academic member of staff, and then Louis from ex-student, like Louis just finished his MSc in Contemporary History, but he has been involved a lot in the Staff Student Solidarity Network activity for the past 2 years. So Sophia, can we start?
Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit dark. I don't have.
Yeah, you are.
I have to sort of switch around. Anyway, you sort of see me. Maybe that's better that way. Yeah. So, I'm not going to kind of give a report on COVID on campus. I wanted to, although there's plenty to say there, and I think that the what was promised to students in terms of their arrival back in September created a lot of expectations that couldn't be met, and a lot of sort of tensions, set up tensions between staff and students, which is very unfortunate. I'm a UCU member, and all through the summer we were asking managers to tell students what people were planning in terms of teaching, whether they plan to teach mainly online, or there would be in-person teaching. And unfortunately we were not really listened to, and these messages went out to students about what they could expect. But unfortunately it seems like they're setting up the same thing for semester 2 by responding to student grievances by saying, oh, well, we'll have more in-person teaching next semester, when it may not really be safe and it may not be sensible. So I teach sociology, and so the kinds of in-person activities that you would typically do, aside from large lectures, which were obviously out because they, too many people in too small a space, it's sort of seminars and discussion-based things, and it really, we kept saying to them, it doesn't make any sense to try to have a discussion activity where people are sitting 2 meters apart wearing masks, and you can't get students to talk to each other, and that it just doesn't work as well as doing it online. So there are various reasons why in current conditions online teaching might actually be better, even though I much prefer in-person teaching myself. And so I wanted to say a couple of things. One is about more cooperative forms of learning, and another is about sort of the resources of the university in thinking about sort of post-COVID society. So I was so glad to see Sophia has this great background of a picture of the 2018 strike at the University of Edinburgh, the UCU strike. because it was really a moment where it started to we started to have these intense sort of conversations across this staff student divide, and that continued in various ways into even creating a course which we called the Future of Our University, an interdisciplinary experiment in cooperative learning. It's a total mouthful, but the point was really the idea of cooperative learning. So trying to think of ways to for staff and students to learn together and listen to each other. And Sophia's also been involved in that, and then we actually set up a course that was developed together by staff and students that involved thinking about the university, how we learn, what we do together, what works, what doesn't work, working conditions for staff, working conditions for students, because many students are workers in a formal way, I mean large proportions of them, but also in a way they're working, they're also working at their learning, and they're working at being in the university and contributing to the value and not just in an economic sense of the university as a institution. So I found that cooperative learning, which connects more with radical traditions of education, including worker education and the whole worker education movement, where you really where people try to build equality into the learning process, rather than thinking about learning as being experts pronouncing on something that everybody has to, the learners just listen to, that it's really a cooperative process of learning from each other and listening to each other's experiences. I found that so valuable, and I wish we were able to do more of that, and more of that with in a way that is open to the city, open to the community, that breaks down the very hierarchical nature of the university as an institution and makes those kind of conversations available. Maybe that's pie in the sky, but there are always corners of the university where one can do that. And it'd be great to see it happening more, to break down the sort of walls of the institution. So I also wanted to say something about sort of post-COVID futures and the role that the university can play. I understand from Sophia that you've all been starting some conversations about what role the university could play in thinking about the post-COVID world we live in Scotland, or in Edinburgh, thinking about retraining for different kinds of jobs. But I would also suggest the university is really a resource in terms of forms of knowledge, but and platforms for conversations about what that future might look like. So there's a really interesting initiative by one of my colleagues, which is about he and some others are doing a citizens climate justice assembly. So they're welcoming input from the public, and it'd be great if ETUC wanted to put in some suggestions about topics and concerns. I'll post the link in the chat later, because they welcome input from anybody in Scotland. So that's one example of a kind of platform for conversations about what the post-COVID environment might look like. And I think there's also a really interesting group of scholars emerging in the public sphere in quite a deliberate way who are talking about the idea of degrowth. Degrowth meaning as an essential element of addressing the climate crisis. But arguably, this COVID experience also makes us realize what is important and think about how we could live a more sustainable kind of life. And the interesting, I mean, many other scholars reject this idea, saying, you know, if the economy doesn't grow, everybody will get poor, there'll be deprivation. But they're trying to look at the structure of the economy and show how much waste there is, how much is consumed by the billionaires, how much, in fact, and saying that actually we have plenty to have a fulfilling life for everybody. And it's a question of redistribution and thinking through priorities. So the kinds of models they're talking about would be really interesting to think through in a practical level in a city like Edinburgh. What would that mean? It certainly means that certain people absolutely have to consume less, but that's mainly the rich. And it's important to think of like climate justice as not being necessarily the same for everybody, because there are people in the world anyway, not so much well, and in Scotland there are people who need to be consuming more because they don't have enough, they don't have housing, they don't have jobs. So it's about redistribution and thinking through what sustainability means in particular contexts and working out sort of fair distribution of the resources that we have in particular contexts. So I think the university can be a resource for ideas, for conversations, and a platform for more cooperative forms of education. So I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thanks a lot, Sophia. So yeah, if anybody has any clarifications that Sophia could give now, if not, we can continue with Louis maybe. I think people don't have any quick questions now. Maybe things will come up. Thanks very much, Sophia. These were very, very helpful points. And let's go to Louis now.
Thank you. I'm Lewis. I'm a representative of the Staff Student Solidarity Network at the University of Edinburgh. So this is like, this idea of a Staff Student Solidarity Network came out of, that was first toyed in the 2018 strikes and occupation of one of the university buildings, which Sophia has lovingly put behind her. But it properly crystallized in the 2019 strike and another building occupation, and then developed into what it is now during the 2020 strikes and occupations, and continues today. And a key part of it was to bridge the gap between staff and students with the universities, not just the University of Edinburgh, but across the country, atomizing staff and students in order to properly or more effectively exploit the wealth that and surplus value that staff and students generate. So part of our occupation was to go beyond what the UCU was offering and help radicalize the UCU, which I believe that we kind of have done so. We've part of our occupations were to call for the demands of the UCU to apply to all staff, not just teaching staff. So like everyone from the cleaners to the technicians, to because of how many staff and students are international, to have minimum compliance with the hostile environment laws, because the University of Edinburgh currently goes beyond what is minimum required. To decarbonise, because the university is a massive investor in fossil fuels, and one of our events in the 2020 occupation/strikes was to disrupt a event that was hosted by BP to basically greenwash itself, and also to decolonise, so to make the University of Edinburgh become aware and culpable in its colonial history. And thankfully for the efforts of a primarily non-white students, and we've managed the David Hume Tower is now currently being renamed the Julius Nyerere Tower, named after the first president of Tanzania, who was an alumni of the university. So the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted the atomization and exploitative nature of the university, and the Staff Student Solidarity Network has been trying to work in tandem with the UCU to try and challenge this. So as Sophia said before me, the departments have really set the stage of how they're going to do teaching, whether it be online or not. And because of that, they've given the impression that individual lecturers have decided how teaching is going to be placed to purposely set the students against staff members instead of targeting the department. The university has also had a knee-jerk reaction to inviting all these students from literally across the world by putting everything online, much to the detriment of the students who sort of need to be on campus to do their courses like medicine, art, veterinary medicine, despite the fact that the UCU during the summer released a report saying move any of the subjects which don't need to be in person online, so that way the subjects and courses which 100% need to be on campus can safely be on campus. But as a result, the university ignored that and had a knee-jerk reaction. Now everything's online, and it's further put a wedge between students who really need to be in person, like artists, medics, etc., and their staff are getting the blame for it instead of the department and the university. And also we have this major issue, which George mentioned, which is happening at Heriot Watt, of inviting all these international students. Some of them, like for many of them, is the first time leaving home, never mind moving to the opposite side of the planet, just so the university can get their rent money. And this is an issue for both staff and students, because for one, all these students now have to rely on the quite frankly shoddy internet that the university provides, and so they can't actually do their education because all these literally hundreds of students are needing to use the internet at the same time. So they can't get the good education because the internet just crashes, like the big school VLE that at Edinburgh is called Learn. It crashed day one for several hours. And the university's response was to give Ethernet cables out. So really doing the bare minimum, and naturally staff are getting the blame instead of the university's mismanagement. The forcing of all these students into halls, having massive mental health tolls and physical health tolls, like some of them were told only use the bathroom in an emergency. How they are defining an emergency, I don't know, and they've even been told try and avoid using wash facilities, which you need to use in a pandemic. And they've been having primarily the cleaning staff who are low paid, non on quite like non-flexible hours, precarious hours, also often international, are being told to enforce keeping the students in their holes. So it's also putting these high at-risk staff at even more risk, just because the university wanted to extract so much rent from the students. The guards that they hired, extra guards, have been really authoritarian and have actually used racial abuse again. And like there's been reports on a Twitter and Instagram that's been set up called Pollock Prisoner of these new guards which the university have hired using anti-Black and anti-Semitic language towards students. And also, this also affects staff in another way, in that PhD students are also staff and members of the UCU, and many of them are in these student accommodations, primarily Pollock Halls, which is sort of like the biggest catered accommodation at Edinburgh. So it's both staff and students are literally being attacked by this, and it's all because the university wanted to extract as much profit as they could from their staff and students. Like, when I first heard about this, I thought it was a joke. It was that bad. They hired a catering company to supply food to students' catered accommodation. They didn't offer halal, kosher, vegetarian, vegan, or allergen food. And in response to this, they sent an email out to all the sports societies saying, get all your members to help make food for Pollock Halls, and which society gets the most students out to help will win a prize. And then the students in accommodation are being told, you're going to get a £50 voucher for X shop. So naturally, a lot of students are very upset. A lot of staff are very upset. So the Staff Student Solidarity have been working to try and help both staff and students. Like a group called Rent Justice Edinburgh have recently been formed, and they're currently planning out a possible rent strike to get a rent reduction, or hopefully, if everything goes well for them, a full rent refund. And they're currently in the planning stage, because the way renting works, it's incredibly disparate, because some people pay all out in once, others pay in monthly installments or semester installments, and because of especially this year, the atomization of the student body, it's very hard to get this working, so they're working on that. The Staff Student Solidarity Network has been, like, before COVID, several of the members, including Sophia, have been working on something called the Workers' Inquiry to get stories and experiences of staff across the board, ranging from lecturers to cleaners, to understand like what their experiences are and how to improve their situation. That's been continuing, and we've been in contact with Rent Justice Edinburgh and Pollock Prisoner, although still need to hear back from Pollock Prisoner about getting stories of the students who are being forced into these accommodation. And one last thing I want to bring out, that what the University of Edinburgh is doing by forcing all these students into the halls is making the city a lot more dangerous and a lot more, and raising inequality within the city, because rent from students is one of their biggest money makers. So not only have they put all these students who have been forced literally from America, China, Australia, everywhere across the world, to come here, put them all at risk, put the citizens of Edinburgh at risk for spreading corona. And also they use that rent to help gentrify the city even further, a constant thing which has been happening, which luckily has been challenged in the Save Leaf Walk campaign because the university is to my knowledge, the third largest landowner in the city. I know it's one of the highest ones. I think it's a third. What they've been doing is constantly making new student halls to get more students in, which is gentrifying the city, and they use the student rents to do this, and so it's completely causing this spiraling of where they keep piling in more and more students, not improving the infrastructure of the university to accommodate this rise in students, gentrifying the city. And well, it didn't happen this year because of the pandemic, but also selling their buildings out to the fringe, which also increases the gentrification of the city because of the fringe, and also bad thing for the climate with all these hundreds of thousands of people coming across the world to the fringe. And yeah, I think that's my long rant over.
Thanks so much, Louis. There are some comments in the chat. Joyce says something about the unfair contract. Maybe we can discuss this specifically after all the presentations finish, maybe, Joyce. And then George has a question. I don't know, maybe Maddie might know about this, so maybe not. So if you don't know, don't feel like you have to answer. So does anyone have any information on how the students are faring with the many private renters? And I'm asking you because your accommodation is this kind of thing that is, I've forgotten, the names of this. So maybe you can say something, Maddie, if you think that.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure about like the specifically private sector, but I know that the accommodation I'm in is run by something called Domus. It's the university accommodation, has a department for what they call continuing students. So second, third and fourth year who rent flats around the city that are owned by the university, but kind of like not classed as halls. So like kind of like the tenement flats. So because we are kind of run by the university's accommodation department, we still had like the same problems with like Wi-Fi, students who are self-isolating can't always access laundry because they're being told not to use like shared facilities. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a problem for like second, third and fourth year students. But yeah, the private renting, I'm not sure what that's like at the moment.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other immediate questions, I was thinking that maybe Fiona, who is a student from Queen Margaret University, maybe if Fiona is there. Fiona, are you there? Yeah.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Hi again. So yeah, so I was thinking if you can share some information about what is happening in Queen Margaret. Maybe you have some things equivalent to what Louis just told us or other things. So I thought it might be a good continuation to go to you following Louis. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that really stuck out to me that Louis said was about the internet. We have had, so I'm in the esports society, hence the ears and the setup. And obviously that means that we are we were online anyway before COVID, and we're online now as well. And our students in halls can barely join us for any of the activities that we're doing because their internet physically can't handle both talking to people and playing a game. And it's not like these are massive games or anything like that either. They're just like games that could run on any laptop, and just the internet cannot handle it at all. And I know I'm welfare officer at the uni and I've complained about it a couple times, but they were basically like, well, there's nothing that we can really do about it apart from, say sorry. And I was like, well, that's not really good enough, is it? Because everyone's online right now, need good internet connection. But yeah, what else have we been doing? We've had we've got like a freebie Friday every week. So every Friday we have, I think the co-op nearby donates food. I think there's someone else from QMU here, so if I'm wrong, correct me on that. But yeah, I mean, I know that we have like food. So it's like last week it was like pasta and pasta sauce that people could come get for free, or there was like pot noodle, and it's all very like, we've got a tent outside the uni, and it's all very regulated about how many people can come into the tent and stuff like that. So that's been positive, I would say. Trying to think what else. Every time I need to think of things, my mind goes blank.
I mean, how is the relationship between staff and students? Like, is there an understanding? Is there that's or you know, how does that work? Because university management systematically put staff and students into opposite camps.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe if you could say something about that.
Yeah, I personally don't think we have a great relationship between staff and students in the sense that it's not just a bad relationship, it just doesn't exist. I personally have quite a good relationship with a lot of the staff, which is, I guess, also why I'm here today. It's because people knew to ask me. However, most of the people that I speak to, the students, whether that be in the capacity of welfare officer or just my friends, they don't really know much, but they don't talk to staff. They don't see a reason to talk to staff in any capacity. Even as far as to like, we have the student union, and I spoke to someone last year who didn't even really know that she could go to the student union to talk to the staff there if she was feeling upset. And that the counselling service wasn't the only option. So even just like fundamental things like that, I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect between the staff and the students, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. If there are no immediate questions to Fiona, I was wondering if Jamie can join us now, since he works at the Queen Margaret University, and also Jamie, if I remember correctly from the email, you work in the library, which means
that's right.
So that's an interesting thing, because so far we were like academics talking about this. So it would be good to hear from someone who is non-academic member of staff what is happening.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so personally, I've been working at home this whole time, so I have been a bit insular, but I've been speaking to Una, who has some points to report, so I'll just convey those. So yeah, as a branch, we think that QMU are not really doing as badly as kind of other universities seem to be. The reason for this is possibly because the union in UCU, we've been involved at all levels in all the COVID meetings, so the business continuity group and things like that. So the committee members think that, you know, it's not perfect, but it seems to be doing a lot better than others seem to be doing. I think the official UCU line is no face-to-face teaching, or perhaps limited teaching when necessary. But the QMU line is kind of limited amount of face-to-face teaching as long as people have a choice about coming in. So I think that the majority of people are happy with this, but just feeling absolutely frazzled and exhausted by having to both do face-to-face and also online teaching. Some staff don't have a choice. It's mainly the professional services staff who are represented by Unison. A lot of people don't have a choice of whether to come in. I know the library front desk staff are having to come in on a limited on a limited schedule, so there is limited library opening as well. As for the security staff in Unison are reporting that they're not having to break up a lot of parties like I think is happening at other places, and when they do, like others, it is the same few people over and over again, and these people are just being asked to leave, but obviously not leave university, but just because that just seems excessive. I think there is Fiona is probably aware of this as well, that there's just a mixture of how students are responding. Some of them are very appreciative and understanding, and some of them are getting a lot of support, and others are not getting as much support and seem to be quite miserable, which I think is really understandable. But this seems to contrast a little bit with a picture being painted nationwide where all students are having an awful time. I don't know how true that is at QMU. But yeah, I think it is different, it being a small institution. The outbreak in the halls of residence, as far as I know, is quite small and contained, and it's not spreading. Yeah, it's just exhausting, but people are just about managing. And as well, we've had assurances from our principal that there will not be any cuts or job losses. Of course, that's not a guarantee, but let's just see how it will all end. And yeah, so I think that's about it.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. There is a question that Joyce put in the chat, which I'll read it now, and then maybe you might have something to say or not, and maybe Grant might have something to say, because it has something to do with libraries and stuff, and it just happens that Grant Batters, apart from being the president of UCU Edinburgh, of course, you know, in his day job, he works in the library. So let's see, Joyce asks, has there been any study to identify how many hours of teaching staff and library staff on and offline contact students from each year group and subject require, so that recruitment can be aligned? It's a quite complex question, Joyce. Maybe I don't know if Jamie or Grant.
Has there been any study to identify how many hours?
How many hours of teaching staff and library staff on and offline contact? I mean,
there was a comment from Fiona that first years are getting contact, but to the detriment of fourth year. Therefore, my question is, has there been any capacity requirement assessment done in order to identify for the current circumstances what volume of staffing hours are required to do the job? And then if you do, then you can fit up your recruitment to go with it. But if you're not even doing the assessment, you don't know what the needs are, and everybody suffers.
Yeah, I don't know, but that is a good point, which I will make a note of.
maybe
As for library staff, so there are two teams in our library. There's kind of the front-facing team who work at the help desk, and there is I don't know what we're called at the moment, but kind of like an academic support team who don't really work on the front line, and most of our team are working at home, and any teaching is being done remotely. I wouldn't know about teaching staff, but
there's also going to be enhanced physical space on Teviot Square there for the library. Does that also have implications for the ability to staff that additional physical space?
There don't seem to be answers to these questions, Joyce, which means that maybe we need to do some research in the various universities in Edinburgh. It would be interesting to to compare. Grant, do you have something? Because I can see you there. Like,
no, I mean, I don't have an answer to answer the question, but I thought I would sort of just share the experience of how Edinburgh approached reopening its library. Joyce's question is interesting, but I think while I'm not aware of it, I would also say I would highly doubt there's been any such study, because it would suggest a level of attention to detail that I've not seen evident anywhere else in the whole process. The University of Edinburgh's library was first reopened. The bit that opened first was the bit that I work in, which is the Centre for Research Collections, which is special collections, archives, and museums, and other heritage collections. And we had the three unions actually pushed the reopening of that back by about, I think it was about a week and a half eventually, because risk assessments hadn't been done to the level they should have been done. But when it opened, it was quite a small operation within a large building, and with all sorts of caveats around that. The staff who were working there and the people that were coming in to use a very limited service felt quite safe. When the whole thing was scaled up to reopen the other services within the library, and the volume of people in the building went up, or at least the perception of how many people could be in the building, following very complicated instructions about how to behave in a building that we know is really hard to manage at the best of times. My colleagues in the CRC were getting quite anxious that all the good work that they'd actually managed to put in place to create something that was safe was going to be rapidly undone by a ridiculous rush to open something that wasn't really ready for it. I think, fortunately, that the numbers haven't been as bad up to the present date as we thought that they would be, but that may partly relate to the number of students who are actually locked down. These students were probably the ones who live on campus are the ones who would likely be using the library through the extended opening hours and things like that. So this could be a problem yet to come. And it's certainly, as one of the largest buildings on campus in terms of density, it's truly alarming what could happen.
Thank you, Grant. Eileen has not said anything yet. Maybe Eileen, if there is something, Eileen works at the Scotland Rural College, which is one of our higher education institutions in Edinburgh. If you would like to tell us something. I mean, I remember the other day you were telling me something about the accommodation, some interesting stuff that happens there, or which was different from what happens at the University of Edinburgh.
Yes, this is true. There's one of the things about our accommodation is it's still actually owned by the institution. So they didn't actually have any sort of long-handed relationship with anybody. So, and that has had an interesting implication. After a lot of argy-bargy, they managed to get teaching sorted out quite well for this year. Anything that can be where personal contact is not needed is run online. So there's none of this, oh, some people can come in if they wish, you know, it's that lecture is given online. I mean, to be fair, the institution did more online work in any case because it's multi-campus. So in that sense, it was easy. For practical work, and there is quite a lot of practical work because of course agricultural students have to do practice on farms, and there's a lot of animal welfare work and a lot of lab work, but students now come in blocks to do it. So they will come in for say 3 days to work on the farm. if they come in from outside Edinburgh, they can have accommodation on a bed and breakfast deal. So they just pay for the days they're there, and the accommodation is only half full, so there's plenty of space for everybody. So that's been sorted. Labs are running at half size, but of course that means staff have to do them twice and that sort of thing. So from the point of view of running the teaching, they got that sorted out, and that's fine. Of course, that was brought at tremendous staff overtime to get everything going. You know, it's all right saying we'll do a double up on everything, but staff have to do it. The effect of that's going to be, and I'm afraid I can't discuss this very much at the moment because it's actually right in the middle of negotiation, and we're just going through, the EIS is just going through a consultation on what we're going to do, you know, whether we're going to take action or not. But there's a nasty little thing been hanging around since before COVID called WAM, or Workplace Allocation Model, which is just a way of thinning down the number of staff. So of course, what we've got is a situation now where staff have spent a year and a bit doing an awful lot of work. And the idea is that they'll come back and they'll have even more because some of them won't be there. This does well predate COVID, but of course I think management probably want to sort it out before things go back to normal and have all the cuts in place. And said, apart from that, I can't really say much more about that at the moment, but maybe in a month's time, we'll be able to report something. But if there is one valuable lesson, it obviously is, apart from being small is helpful. We're even smaller than Queen Margaret. So being small is useful, but if the accommodation is owned by the institution, there's much less pressure to force students into using it. They've got sort of, I suppose, less of a loss to stand. I think that will do, unless anybody wants to ask me anything.
Okay, thank you. If there is no immediate, question about some clarification about what Eileen did, the plan. Des wants to ask something. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question based on what people are saying. Is that what I'm gathering, people are saying there seems to be a lot more work for lecturers and other people because of handling numbers. And so here from Queen Margaret, there's no plans from the university to make people redundant or to make cuts. And that means that there must be, seems to me that would mean that there's the same volume of business, possibly even more business than usual in terms of what people have to do. And so, I mean, is Queen Margaret unique in that setup, or is why is Queen Margaret is not talking about any redundancies whatsoever and possibly more work? And what's the difference? It wasn't clear to myself what's the difference between Queen Margaret and other universities such as Edinburgh. That's my question.
Who can answer this question? I don't know, Des. I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to remember something that Yurik had said in the kind of first meeting. It was something that had to do, and I think Fiona and Jamie said those things. It has something to do with the union being more involved in the kind of decision making, maybe. But I mean, I don't know. Does anybody else, like Sophia, Grant? Why? I don't know.
Can I cut in here, Sophia?
Yeah, George. Yes.
I think it's in stark contrast to our situation. Where we've discussed the thing where semester 2 is coming up, and they've had academics have had all summer to prepare the RBL for the semester 1, but they're just going to suddenly have to it's looking like all online for semester 2. Why are they making the cuts and going to exacerbate this problem? You know, that's a question we would like answered. But we've always said to them that we are of the opinion that the cuts they're making, the proposed redundancies, they say they've actually got, so I think they've got about 90 through VR at the moment, and the redundancies, we believe, and they've never directly refuted it. In fact, they did admit it once. It came before COVID. COVID is the covering, you know, the icing on the cake. That's what they're using to hide it. It's restructuring of the university, financial mismanagement. So probably Queen Margaret doesn't have the same issues as Harry Watt does at the moment. But we've always said that it was issues that were extant before COVID, and that was the real issue.
Okay, thank you. Sophia has something to add to this, and before Sophia adds this, I just want to tell you my plan. This meeting was sort of meant to kind of reinforce cooperation with other groups, and I would like to put Ian on the spot just for a bit. I mean, he's sitting there to see what he is thinking, as like he's somebody from completely outside the whole thing from, you know, from the council. But then Donny also has some things to say about further education and higher education, but also Pete Canel has to say some very interesting things. So about, you know, the potential of all this. So let's see Sophia's point about the difference between Queen Margaret and ourselves, maybe in Edinburgh or some other ones, and then we'll continue with Ian, and then with Donny, and then with Pete. Okay, let's do that. We've got another 20 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So, like at Harriet Watt, the cost cutting started quite a long time before COVID, but not in a big way. So, there have been already a voluntary severance package instituted, but that I mean, that's post-COVID. But prior to COVID, they were asking schools to cut budgets, and also talking about needing a kind of cushion of quite substantial cushion of you know, profit every year to cutting costs in various kinds of ways. So I think the one reason is that the university has borrowed enormous sums, despite the fact that it has enormous reserves. It has borrowed huge sums, and we don't know whether this is the case at Edinburgh, but in other universities where there have been such enormous packages borrowed, the terms of the loan agreements have required certain growth in student numbers, a certain proportion of revenue to expenditure, and so on. So that was there's been some reports on that. So it's interesting thing to investigate. In the case of Edinburgh, we actually don't know. I just wanted to make a quick point about accommodation. I think it was really interesting what Eileen said, and one of the issues with universities generally has been that universities made these agreements with accommodation providers that they have to have they guarantee a certain occupancy rate, and so if they didn't, then the university would have some liabilities. And in the case of Edinburgh, I don't know what the extent to which Pollock calls is, and maybe Grant will know this, is actually in-house or part of Edinburgh First, which is sort of semi-outsourced, although this is a bit of a fiction. So there are these complex financial arrangements that also feed into this whole process that I think we wish we knew more about, but it's hard to tell from the public university finances about how all these systems work.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Shall we see what Ian, Ian, you're sitting here listening to us for 1 hour and 10 minutes, and we are this university spreading, we're like everywhere in the city center. How does the council interfaces with this? I'm really curious.
Although I've been seconded to Unison for nearly 4 years now, my professional job with the council is a senior private rented services officer. And I used to deal a lot with, I used to inspect the pre-built university accommodation. I would deal with fire safety issues and sizes of rooms and work along with the architects, but I also worked with some of Edinburgh's biggest residential agencies as well. And I know that the university, Pollock Hall's accommodation block, they run and own a lot of property in Edinburgh. And I was wondering if somebody could tell me if they have offered students a reduction in their rent from their own stock, but also they are very dependent on agencies within Edinburgh as well. And certain agencies will actually set aside a set amount of accommodation. So I'd be interested to find out if some of these agencies have been approached to see if there is a way of working out a reduced deal through the owners of the properties. Or has this just been completely overlooked by the university in an attempt to just gain the money through the students having to come through here and stay and commit themselves to staying in these blocks. And the other thing that I was going to say, I have a vested interest in Edinburgh University because my daughter works for facilities management in the King's Buildings. And they recently they bought land at the bottom. I don't know if some of the colleagues actually know about the King's Buildings, but at the bottom of Mayfield Road, there's a piece of land that Edinburgh Uni recently bought it over about 2 years ago. And in the last couple of months, they've also bought the 3 houses that currently stand on there. And I find it incredible that at a time that we are discussing redundancies and saving money, they have actually had the money to go out and to buy the 3 or 4 houses. I can't quite remember. It's quite a strange thing because they bought the land either side and towards the back. And they've obviously said they can't do anything with that unless we buy over the other houses. And that's happened within the last 2 months.
Thanks for this information, Ian. More things for us to kind of check. Shall we go to Donny to see some of these kind of connections between further education and higher education? Yeah,
thanks. I won't talk too much about further education because I think what you're discussing now is so interesting. I mean, the question about the redundancies, if you have a business model, then staff are a nuisance. They're a cost, even if they're lecturing, even if they're providing services. So their approach is simply how much money can we save so the business gets more? They don't care about education at all. So in further education, we have larger classes, more students, fewer dropouts online than when they were in classroom. And so the way that they're trying to get us is not to make us redundant, but it's particularly in Forth Valley College, but they plan to spread it everywhere. What they're doing is they're saying, you're not a lecturer anymore. you're an instructor. That means you don't have 22 hours of class contact with students, you have 35, no hours, no time to prepare. We cut your pay by £8,000. We cut your holidays by £8,000. And we tell you that your job is redundant and you have to apply for the worst job, for this rubbish job. That's what they're doing. And they're planning to roll it out across the country. And we're going to ballot for strike action. Forth Valley is already taking action. We're probably going to be doing that in the new year. But I wanted to talk more generally about the sort of the interface between, which I think Lewis brought up very well, the interface between students and staff about education, because at the moment there's a document being discussed with the government about how it's going to go forward in the future in terms of blended learning and all that sort of stuff. And let's understand that the COVID is an indoor disease. It's a winter disease. The reason why it improved in the summer and why we've got a second wave coming now, it's absolutely clear it's an indoor disease. Therefore, if you are forcing students and staff into buildings, you are going to spread the disease more than if you don't force them into it. So the approach that all the unions are taking, that's UCU, EIS, ULA, both fellow and the two wings of EIS, is that, and it was what Liz was saying, the rational approach is that everything that can be done off campus, online, should be, and those things that can't be and have to be done, you should have the space, you should have the capacity, you should have the PPE, you should have everything that is needed to make it safe for those. That's the educational approach. What the government is taking, I suspect, because of the vice-chancellors, is the blended learning approach. And blended learning means, if you don't, to be polite, F all. It doesn't mean anything. What it is, it's a means by which the vice-chancellors can say, we'll have people in just enough to justify their rents and justify their fees, because otherwise we'll have to give them some money back. They're deliberately keeping it vague. We're saying, define what you mean. Remote working should be the default, and everything else that has to be delivered on campus is delivered on campus. And they're extremely resistant to it. And I don't want to talk too long, but what I think is when this document comes out, and it's going to come out in a few days, I think that the unions, and I'm hoping the students can join us in this, NUS or USER or whatever bodies there are, actually have to reject that. And we want an educational rationale that keeps everybody safe, because they're going for pile of students high, make the money, and who cares about the country? I mean, somebody talked about the whole nightmare of Christmas for the students, going back, coming in, spreading it. You know, I mean, it's absolutely criminal what's happened. And of course, England is paying the price in terms of this lockdown. You know, it's not the only reason. There's all sorts of other things. But I do think we need to, if in a week or two, we will probably have to denounce what the government has done and put our own alternative. And I think if that can come out of this meeting, because it requires coordination, you know, and if we can do it through the ETUC or whatever, I think that will be very, very good, because the model they have, it's a business model. It's about make money. And if people die along the way, well, that's tough, isn't it? That's their attitude. That's me. Sorry to rant.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Donny. So, okay. So this meeting was meant to sort of discuss different approaches for the future. And we have not actually managed to do this because there is a lot to share about what is going on at the minute. But I think that we've mentioned a lot of things, and it has been recorded now, and we can go back to those things in order to continue. And that's why I just would like to invite Pete Canel now to come and say again something that he already said in the first meeting that we had, I think, or that a vision about a long-term plan, which I think we need to find a way to work on it alongside the small steps that we do, all the firefighting that we have to do all the time. You know, we can't escape from that. So, Pete, do you want to tell us a little bit? You are muted. Pete, do I need? Yeah.
Yeah, no, okay. I've done it. Thanks for reminding me what I said. Because if you hadn't, I might have struggled a bit. Yeah, so I mean, I think that, it's good that this meeting took place tonight, and I hope it becomes a regular thing, because I think it's really important that we have this kind of shared connections across the city, because we have institutions of different sizes and shapes and different experiences, but together we're much stronger than we are separate. And I mean, I work for an institution which bizarrely has had, in a sense, very little change, because we work at a distance, and have 500 part-time staff across Scotland who have worked from home, so we're still working from home. But actually, there are issues. Student numbers have gone up really substantially, and there's been quite a lot of tension with the university, who have actually been recruiting new staff, but recruiting them on short-term contracts. So we're certainly not without issues to work on. But just to go back to the vision, I mean, I think we've got to manage doing two things at once, both the kind of practical solidarity that copes with the immediate issues that confront us, the redundancies and so on, and keeping safe in the immediate. But it does also seem to me that the pandemic has been a kind of signal for something that was always going to come along. I mean, we live at a time when climate crisis is not something in the future, but a present threat. I think it's also true we live in the age of pandemics. I mean, we'll be very lucky if COVID-19 is the only pandemic in the next 4 or 5 years. There may be others already on the horizon, and that's to do with the way in which we live in this world at the moment, and the way that we treat the environment. And so it does seem to me that we do need a vision of the future, which builds on the best of what we've had, but actually doesn't assume that the kind of neoliberal model that has developed is the norm that can't be questioned. One of the things which I think is really frustrating, I mean, I was talking earlier today with colleagues at another institution who are struggling to adapt to a kind of online world. I mean, I work in an institution which has been working on that for a long time. It's got kind of systems and procedures and advice which we could share, but actually we operate in a competitive environment, not in a collaborative one. So it seems to me that if we want a sustainable future, we need to start looking at what that future would look like in a way that is safe for the long term, is actually about learning to live in the world in a more sustainable way. And that's not just about having courses about sustainability. I mean, I think there's some immediate things as well. One, we've got a situation where hundreds of thousands of people in Scotland are losing their jobs. Some of them, those that work in the North Sea, for example, have got skills that would be really vital to a sustainable transition. But there's no serious plan for giving them support to transition into doing that. Quite the opposite. Things have been left up to the vagaries of the market, which actually means there's less people, lots less people working in sustainable renewable energy jobs in Scotland now than there was 5 years ago. I mean, that's a horrific indictment of a lack of planning. So it's not going to come from the top. I think actually people like us have got to work from below to actually start building that vision of what and then actually try and build the power to make it happen. I mean, the two things, ideas without actually the means to make them happen, are really not worth the paper they're written on. But I think we do need to have that vision, because if we've got that vision, it's one that actually isn't just about universities. It actually appeals outside universities. I think we could take it much, much further than that. So, I mean, I think one of the things that we might want to do is to draw in people who would be keen to work on that. It certainly shouldn't be just the people on the call tonight, but I think it's something which a lot of people would be interested in. I know I'm involved in climate jobs campaigning with a whole lot of people for whom this is something that is of huge interest, and I think education in general, universities in particular, have got a real role to play in this. And a sustainable future needs people who can do engineering and ecology and all the rest of it, but it needs poets and artists and care workers and all of those other things as well. That's what a truly sustainable vision would look like.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Pete. I just saw here Hilary, because I'm just trying to pull together all the various things that have happened in the past month. And when Pete mentioned those things in a kind of more summarized form in a previous meeting, Hilary has this idea that we might find a way to speak to the Scottish government. So maybe, Hilary, would you like to say a couple of words about this? Because that was, again, another great idea, and it was your idea. So instead of me talking about it, it's better if you speak.
Yes, you really enjoy putting people on the spot. But yes, no, it seems to me that, you know, you can criticize this government, obviously, and we do, but they do have some way of speaking to trade unions. You know, they say they take advice from and ideas from trade unions on board. Now, you know, how much this is, I'm sure it varies, you know, how much this is real and how much it's not real. But I think we have to take advantage of the door that's open, even if it's open only slightly to consultation. Now, the STUC is in regular discussion with the Scottish Government. I'm not sure how exactly that's organised, and I'm not sure whether we, you know, through Edinburgh TUC should do it via the STUC, or whether we should seek to have our own approach. But the particular point that people made at the first meeting, that higher education has got a huge role to play in retraining for sustainable jobs, just focusing on that primarily is something that we could take to the education minister to discuss. And I don't know, Des knows probably more about the procedure for getting meetings with the government, but I know, for example, that the Edinburgh freelance branch of the NUJ has had productive meetings with the culture minister about a vision for the media post-COVID. So it does happen, you know, so I think we should maybe be one of the things we should try and do.
Thank you very much. It's like 8 o'clock exactly. So I think we should wrap up here, and maybe I'll switch off the recording, and if anybody wants to hang out after the thing to say something informal, we can continue for a little while. But we need to get on with all of these things. And one of the other things that we've discussed in the previous meeting was that before we go to the Scottish Government, we could circulate a petition, and we have already a draft exists about this petition, and we should go back to this plan and organize some kind of process to get to those, to do these two things at least, to do the letter, the petition, and then try to see how to work maybe with the STUC for the meeting with the Scottish Government. So yeah, so thanks everybody. I'm just gonna stop the recording now.